Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to another TU22 PTS video for the Division 2. In this one, we are finally going to be fully diving into Seasons 2.0, the big new addition and feature that is coming to the Division 2 in this next major update. At this point, we've been talking about this thing for a long time, right? We've seen the devs' ideas on paper, we've heard them pitched in these streams, in these articles, but today, now that I've had hands-on time with Seasons 2.0 and I've gotten to really see what it's all about, I want to report how it feels in practice. And so I want to start this video out a bit differently than I usually do, and right off the top here, I want to give you my overall bottom line thoughts about Seasons 2.0. Reason being, I'm sure there are many out there who either have not played the game in a while or are considering getting into the Division 2 for the first time and are wondering if this system and these changes that they're making, is it really good? Is it actually going to improve the game? Is it going to be something that I want to invest my time into? So for that reason, I want to give you my overall thoughts here at the top, but then afterwards, feel free to continue watching or use the chapters below to hear my more in-depth explanations and analysis on each of the specific systems that comprise Seasons 2.0. So here you go, here's the TLDW, what do I think about Seasons 2.0? Here I think is a big question and point. Does this radically revolutionize how you play the Division 2 or what content you're playing while you're engaging with seasonal content? No, it does not. And I do think that the impact of Seasons 2.0 would have been much greater had it launched alongside the game's upcoming DLC as was originally intended by the devs. That all being said, there is no question in my mind that this is a much deeper and more engaging seasonal model than that of Seasons 1.0 and of anything that we've seen in the Division 2 to date. There are systems like the priority objectives and the seasonal modifiers that I think have been smartly built with future-proofing elements. We'll get into more of that in the breakdown. But with everything on offer here, alongside stuff like more regular and varied limited time events. By that I mean the devs have said we're getting more regular XP events in the future. They're doing a throwback event where they're going to bring back old content for players to go through. With all of that in mind, I do genuinely believe that Seasons 2.0 is the foundation for the Division 2 to feel more lively and organic day in and day out moving forward for your everyday player. And if you want to hear more about why I think that is, then keep watching. Alright, so getting into it, the first thing that you're going to be interacting with when a new season launches is the seasonal journey. It's the first screen that opens up when you now go into your seasons tab. And one of the reasons that I say it's the first thing you'll be interacting with is that you can access it before you reach the endgame. There's 7 tiers here, and the first one unlocks at level 1. I do think this system overall is the most clear example of how seasonal characters were going to fit into this entire system, given it is accessible from the beginning of the game, and it gives you objectives from across the game like completing different game modes, missions, it even ties in build crafting and more. So yeah, you can definitely see the bones about how seasonal characters were going to fit into this. But how does it work? It's pretty simple. There are 7 of these journey missions in total. To complete each one, you just need to complete 6 of the 8 objectives listed, so you do get some agency, some choice in which of these objectives you want to go after. And you get rewards along the way. These become increasingly important the further you get into the journey system. For example, tiers 4 through 6 give you your 3 active modifiers for the season. We'll cover those again later. But everything involving modifiers are another integral part of the seasonal experience, so going through each of these tiers of the mission journeys in the early weeks of a new season will be the standard flow. And overall, I expect this to be slightly less exciting for veteran players, but it should be a good onboarding tool and tour guide for newcomers. But like I said, it does give good rewards. These include exotic caches the further on you get in the journeys, the aforementioned seasonal modifiers, and each of the 7 tiers here rewards you with a big chunk of season pass XP. It is important to note that that is now disconnected from your Shade XP. So between these journeys and the priority objective system, that is how you're going to be leveling up your season pass. Speaking of, let's move on to the priority objective system. Alongside seasonal modifiers, which again we're going to get to soon, these are my favorite part of Seasons 2.0. Reason being, they give you an infinite outlet for regularly rotating objectives with good rewards. You find this tab right next to your journeys within the season menu. Again, this is a very integral system to the whole thing. And what you'll see is 3 different things to choose from. It shows you the category type at the top. One thing I wanted to mention is that this now includes PvP objectives, which I absolutely love. Previously PvP had no impact or correlation to seasons whatsoever. But yeah, you can choose PvP objectives, you could choose open world activities, you could choose strongholds, main missions. Below that category, it will tell you the estimated duration that it anticipates this thing will take to complete. It also tells you the reward that you're going to get. But in order to see the specific objective, you have to pick one of these 3 things and decrypt it, and then it tells you the exact steps that you need to follow. But it is important to note that a reroll system does exist if you don't like the objective types or the rewards that are on offer. You can do that, hopefully get some better better picks. Now, one criticism that I will give here is that, again, I think this entire kind of a system would have hit a lot harder had it come alongside a bunch of new content to populate it, because as it stands, everything that you're going to do within the priority objective system is all content and things that have existed in the game previously and that you've likely done before. But like I said, by them adding PvP stuff in, that adds variety. It's also noteworthy to mention that owners of Warlords of New York will automatically get objectives in New York filtered in here, so that adds in location variety. And when the Brooklyn DLC launches next year, that will also filter into this, and you can get objectives and missions to go do in Brooklyn. And so to me, that indicates that all future locations, modes, and whatever they add to the Division 2 in the coming years will dynamically be added to the list of possible priority objectives. And in my opinion, that is a smart way to set this up to ensure that it stays fresh. But in its current form, despite this being all old content, I do think that the pace and reward of this will hook many in. For example, I did a quick set of 3 priority objectives. For the first one, I saw that it was an activity and that it would reward me with an exotic cache, so I said let's do this. Once I decrypted, it said I needed to complete 1 loop of descent, so that was pretty easy. It took me, I think, 6.5 minutes by the time my run was over. I got an exotic from that. I then picked an open world activity that it said would reward me with some XP. It said just to do 1 activity within the Foggy Bottom zone of DC. That one actually ended up being a bit more than I bargained for, because there was both an open world boss and rogue agents waiting for me when I got there, so that was intense. But I got that done, and then finally on my third pick, it offered me the choice of doing a main mission for a seasonal modifier. And so let's use that segue to move on to the modifier system, shall we? Now, I want to clarify something right away. You can deactivate and re-enable this at any time. If you do not like what the seasonal modifier does to the base gameplay of the Division 2, you do not have to play with it. And furthermore, nothing in the game is going to require you to have this active, right? The only thing that they've said is that the new master difficulty that they're introducing for the climax missions each season are going to be designed with the modifier in mind. But even so, I don't think it's going to be required that you have this on in order to play it. Now, here's the thing, and I've been looking at some of the online reactions to this whole system over the past 2 days since the PTS went live. I think that many see the base modifier here and the hostile enemy ones and see this whole system as kind of a hindrance more than a bonus. But after spending some time with this and really looking at what the system has to offer, I truly think that once people actually dive into this and get it in their hands, it'll prove to be a lot of fun. And after playing the PTS for, the limited time that I have so far, I truly can't wait and see what the devs come up with for future seasons. And that's what's really exciting, is that this entire system now gets refreshed every major update. We get a new modifier with new enemy ones, with new passive ones to slot in. And once you see some of these examples, we're going to go over it, the possibilities are really endless. So the core base thing to this entire system is that you have your global modifier. For this season, that's going to be called Point Blank. And it's pretty simple. It gives you added amplified damage for short, medium, and long range, depending on what range you're engaging your enemies at. And they've added this cool UI augmentation to demonstrate this. If you're looking at anything in your crosshairs, it'll show on the left side this curve where blue is short range, yellow is medium, and red is long. So it fits right into the gameplay flow. Then you have your active modifiers, and these serve as an ability that is tied to this main modifier. Now, I was a bit annoyed that these were not auto-unlocked for the PTS so that we could actually test them out. The way you unlock them, as we mentioned earlier on, is that they are tied to the later tiers of the journey system. And so unfortunately, by the time of me making this video, I don't have any of these unlocked, but already the descriptions, which you can go and read, sound quite fun. One of them is that you get to flip the range values, right? So you get even greater amounts of amplified damage at close range combat. There's another one that for the duration of the ability, you get to change the functionality of all of the minor modifiers that you have slotted in so that they work differently at different ranges. And that's the thing, is that these seem to be actual abilities that we will get to activate and use. I don't know what button it's tied to, but based off of the wording of all of these seem to be an actual ability that gets added into our arsenal, so that should be pretty fun. But once we move on to the minor or the passive modifiers, that is where this all starts to get really wild. So you can equip 3 of these in total, and if you start to read through the tree here, they have a category for short, medium, long, and multi-zone ranges. This is where I think there's going to be some huge build potential. For example, one of them entails that when you kill enemies at different ranges, you get a random bonus. That could be something like extra movement speed or weapon handling, etc. There's one where you get stacking amounts of marksman rifle damage for long-range kills. There's some with pros and cons, like you get greatly increased headshot damage at long range, but therefore you have some reduced ammo. But in the few of these that I've tested thus far, these are going to be really fun. And it adds an entire new layer and element to the build crafting side of the game. I mean, this is on top of our regular builds and gear and exotics and everything. The way you obtain these is you farm them via the priority objective system. It all feeds back in, right? And it gives relevance and longevity to that throughout the season. The last part is then the modifiers that the hostile enemies get, which more than anything, I think just make you think a bit while you're playing. So for example, there's one where certain enemies will have a shield that won't break unless you target them at a specific damage range. Just as a side note, that specific one I think needs some tweaks for visibility and its function. I've already left feedback about that, so in case you were going to comment about that, don't worry, I'm on top of it. There's then another one that makes it so that if you engage enemies at the medium range, a certain amount of damage will get reflected back at you, so you need to reposition so that you don't kill yourself. And this might sound odd, but I've already fell into kind of a fun rhythm where as I'm going through and when I see these enemies with these different symbols above their head, I'll call out to myself Pearl or Serpent, right? Those are two of the icons that are tied to these. And I then change my strategy according to those in real time. And so I think on day one of the PTS, when people were watching streams or they got in there for themselves and they saw that to start out there was no customization to the modifier system that was unlocked, you actually had to farm these out, and the fact that all of the hostile ones were active from the beginning, which by the way the dev said is not going to be how it is in the live game. These are going to progressively open up right as the season goes on. So the day one, maybe they only have one of these modifiers active, but then as you grow more powerful, the enemies will get more of their hostile ones unlocked too. But anyway, the way that it was presented day one of the PTS, I think a lot of people looked at that and said that the system just looked kind of plain. But I'm telling you guys, after looking into this, I really do think that once people get into the depth of some of this, it's going to open up some big new gameplay avenues and some really fun combinations with our pre-existing builds. So I'm really excited by the potential of this and for future seasons modifier sets. Again, that's something that we have now to look forward to every time we get a new update, is what is the new modifier going to be? What is all the tree of passive ones, right? It's a whole new deal. All right, but lastly, let's now move on to the Manhunt Scouts. I think this has easily been the least spotlit thing among Seasons 2.0, partially because they're now kind of fully decoupled from your main season stuff, right? Because seasons now deal with the entirety of the game's content. It's not just focused on the manhunts. But instead of having the monthly unlocks like we're used to nowadays in the Division 2 seasons, there's now going to be 14 Manhunt Scouts in total that unlock once per week. And what they basically boil down to is these small riddles that you solve for some pretty solid rewards. So for example, in the first scout, the flavor text revealed that this stuff is going to be happening within the Foggy Bottom open world zone, and then the clue for the first activity says that it has to do with taxis. So you put two and two together, you go and do the taxi graveyard control point, and for doing that, and this is the reward for every single little activity, you get an exotic component. And so for each of these scouts having 3 activities in total, that's 3 exotic components every week. That's pretty solid. The riddle after that was then to resupply control points within Foggy Bottom. After that, I had to do some open world activities. So again, the gameplay here is not revolutionized. You're not going to be doing different activities than you were maybe used to in the previous iteration. But I really do think that this format is more engaging, more fun. The cadence of these is better. You now get it every week instead of having to wait an entire month. And one detail I really like is that all of the seasonal comms, or the Manhunt comms rather, now have their own home and hub within the Manhunt tab. You can click the button at the bottom and it brings up the briefing you can play. You can access then the seasonal comms, all of that stuff right from there instead of having to dive into the progression menu. So I think that just makes them a bit more important and more central. So yeah, overall for the Manhunt stuff here, in my opinion, I think this redesign is a good one. And there you have it, my friends. Those are the 4 major categories to go over in regards to Seasons 2.0. It's like I said at the start, does this revolutionize how you play the Division 2? It does not. But compared to the very stagnant structure that we've been used to with the Division 2 seasons for years now, I really do think that new and old players alike will find value and greatly increased enjoyment with this new system. And as I mentioned as we went through, there's still a lot of stuff here that we haven't experienced or seen yet, whether that be the full customization potential of the seasonal modifiers. I really think people are going to enjoy that in gameplay. There's also the fact that we now get master difficulty to the climax missions. That's going to be a whole new thing. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm sure there were people out there that were hoping or expecting that Seasons 2.0 was going to provide you with all new activity types and ways to play the Division 2. That's not really what you get here, but the dev said from the start that their goal with this was to establish a new foundation for the game. And so keeping in mind the future stuff that we're getting, like the Brooklyn DLC, like whatever content they have planned for year 7 of the game, the fact that Seasons 2.0 is now the baseline for all of that, I think is a really beneficial official thing. And it should mean that every major update moving forward from here is more engaging, more fun, and there's simply going to be more to do. But that is about all of the thoughts that I have to share, guys. I now turn it over to you. What are your thoughts, impressions, whatever, about Seasons 2.0? Whether you have been playing the PTS for yourself and you've gotten hands-on with this system, or you've just been watching coverage like this, what are your first impressions and thoughts about this new feature coming to the Division 2? Did it live up to what you were hoping for? Is there more you were hoping to see from it? As always, let me know down below and I look forward to reading through your thoughts. I very much hope you all enjoyed the video. If so, and you're not already, I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button. There is plenty more Division 2 content coming your way, both for the upcoming PTS phase and the full launch of Year 6 Season 2 next month. So, stay tuned for it all. That is going to do it for me today, though, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.